I grew up in Ravenhill, a small coastal town where everyone knew your name and eventually your secrets. I never thought I'd return after leaving 10 years ago, but life has a way of pulling you back to the places you tried to escape. I had hoped to find peace, maybe a fresh start. Instead, I found betrayal. My name is Daniel Foster, and this is the story of how a friend became a stranger, how trust can rot without warning, and how the past always has a way of finding you. I arrived in Ravenhill one early spring morning. The waves were rough, the docks smelled of salt and seaweed, and the sky hung heavy with gray clouds, the kind that make even familiar streets feel strange. My childhood friend, Richard Hale, was waiting for me. "You're finally back," he said, clapping my shoulder with rough hands. "Ravenhill's been waiting for us." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Richard and I had been inseparable as boys, racing along the piers, climbing cliffs, fishing in the cold Atlantic waters, dreaming about leaving this town together someday. Back then, he was my brother, in every way that mattered. He offered me a stake in his business at the docks. "We'll rebuild this town together," he said, "just like we dreamed." I agreed, hungry for belonging, for the comfort of someone who knew me. At first, everything seemed perfect. The town welcomed me back, the docks buzzed with activity, but then I began to notice small things I ignored at first. Shipments were missing. Invoices didn't match deliveries. Workers whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. "Daniel, check the accounts," one man said, eyes lowered. I brushed it off. Not Richard. Not him. Then I found the ledger. It was hidden beneath a stack of papers in the back of his office. My name was scrawled across entries I had never authorized. Debts, transactions, contracts that had nothing to do with me. Every line screamed deception. I confronted Richard that night beneath the pier, the waves crashing like an angry jury. "Richard, what is this?" I demanded. He looked at me, calm, almost amused. "Someone had to take the fall. Better you than me." I realized then that everything we had shared, the childhood adventures, the whispered secrets, even our shared dreams, had been a carefully constructed lie. For weeks, I tried to prove my innocence. I went to town officials, workers, even the local sheriff. But Richard had anticipated everything. He had manipulated facts, spun stories, and turned the town against me. I was alone. Nights became unbearable. I stayed in my small apartment near the docks, hoping distance from the docks would give me clarity, some relief. But Ravenhill has a way of following you, of weaving its shadows into your mind. The air seemed heavier, the fog thicker, and every sound reminded me of him, Richard. Then the letters began. No return address, just envelopes with my name scrawled in a handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside were short messages. "You can run, Daniel, but the truth runs faster. He watches, always." I told myself it was a prank, a cruel joke, but the messages grew more personal, describing my routines, where I went, even the way I slept. Someone was tracking me, learning me. Someone knew me better than I knew myself. The first time I heard footsteps outside my apartment door, I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. I told myself it was nothing, just nerves. But deep down, I knew better. I couldn't sleep. Nights were spent staring at the ceiling, imagining shadows moving across the walls. Sometimes, in the reflection of my computer screen, I thought I saw a figure, tall, leaning, waiting, always just beyond reach. One night, I received a phone call. No one spoke, just the soft sound of waves crashing, like Ravenhill itself was calling me back. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to scream, but a part of me,
The part that refused to let fear control me, made me answer. And then I heard it, a voice, unmistakable. You left, but you belong to Ravenhill now. I dropped the phone. My hands shook. The room felt colder, darker. I felt watched, as if unseen eyes pressed into my back. It wasn't just Richard. It was something else, something born from lies, betrayal, and greed. I knew I had to run forever. The docks were the center of all his schemes, the place where his betrayal had begun. I had to face it, whatever awaited me there. The fog rolled thick over the wooden planks. Waves smashed against the pillars below, sending sprays of icy water into the air. The docks felt alive, creaking and groaning like the hull of a ship about to break. And there he was, Richard standing at the far edge, looking out to sea. The moonlight caught his face, but it wasn't human. His eyes were hollow, reflecting nothing but darkness. "You shouldn't have come back," he said calmly. "Why?" I shouted. "Why ruin everything? Why ruin me?" He smiled, slow and deliberate. "Because you were too soft, too trusting. And trust is power, Daniel. You'll understand soon enough." Shadows moved along the pier, twisting like living things. I realized then that his betrayal had unleashed something darker than human cruelty. The town itself seemed to whisper, "Betrayal never dies." I followed him to the northern lighthouse, perched precariously on the cliffs above the roiling Atlantic. The wind tore at my coat. The storm clouds broke into flashes of lightning, illuminating the jagged rocks below. Inside, the spiral staircase creaked beneath my feet. At the top, I found a journal, pages filled with my life, my habits, my fears, my past, written in his hand. He knew me better than I knew myself, but the final page chilled me to my core.
"Daniel, it is not enough to ruin the town. Betrayal must be witnessed, remembered, feared. Only then does it take its full power." I understood then that this wasn't just greed or envy. It was a lesson, a legacy of fear, and I had become part of it. I waited for him. Days passed. No sign of Richard. Then, one stormy night, he appeared in my apartment. Not through doors, not through windows. He came through the shadows themselves. "You cannot escape what you helped create," he said. "Ravenhill is alive, and it remembers every act of betrayal." The room went cold. My breath fogged. I felt hands, cold, unseen, pressing against my shoulders. I tried to move, but I was rooted to the spot. "Why are you doing this?" I gasped. "To show you," he replied, "that trust is fragile. Betrayal leaves a mark deeper than any wound. And one day, you will understand." I blacked out that night. When I woke, I was lying on the docks. The lighthouse loomed behind me, silent. Richard was gone. The journal lay at my feet. I never saw him again. But the town had changed. Shadows lingered in corners. Fog rolled heavier over the water. I could feel the weight of every betrayal. Mine, his, the whispers of others who had wronged and been wronged, pressing down on Ravenhill. I left the town once more, but I carry it with me. Every time I hear waves crashing, I see the docks. Every time fog rolls over water, I feel eyes on me. And sometimes, just sometimes, I hear that voice again. Betrayal never dies. It waits. It feeds. After that night, I knew I couldn't run anymore. Richard's shadow had embedded itself into every corner of my life, into every quiet moment. Sleep offered no refuge, only dreams of the docks, of the lighthouse, of his hollow, unblinking eyes. I realized the only way to end this, whatever this was to return to the docks and face him directly. The town was silent as I approached. Windows shuttered, streets empty. Fog curled across the streets like a living thing, thick and suffocating. Ravenhill itself seemed to be holding its breath. When I reached the pier, I saw him, Richard Hale, or what had once been Richard. He stood motionless, staring at the water, but the air around him seemed wrong. The shadows bent toward him. Waves slapped violently against the pillars below, like the sea itself was reacting to his presence. "You shouldn't have come back," he said, his voice calm but filled with something otherworldly. "I need answers," I shouted. "Why me? Why all this?" He smiled, and I swear the fog behind him twisted with it, forming faces I recognized. Men and women from the docks, townspeople who had vanished, all staring at me from the mist. "Because," he said slowly, "betrayal is a lesson, and every lesson must be taught personally." The pier beneath me creaked. I tried to back away, but the fog thickened, pulling me closer. Richard's shadow stretched across the planks, reaching like fingers. I felt myself being crushed, suffocated by the weight of years of lies, manipulation, and darkness. "You think this is about money? About the docks? No. This is about fear, about trust, about remembering every wrong, every slight, every weakness." Suddenly the shadow surged. Faces of those I trusted and lost twisted through the fog. I heard voices, my own, accusing me, reminding me of every time I doubted, every time I ignored the warning signs. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the wind. And then I saw it. The lighthouse, glowing in the distance, a beacon of cold, pale light. I realized that all this, Richard, the shadows, the fog, was bound to him, to the betrayal he had seeded in every corner of Ravenhill. I lunged at him, desperate. "This ends tonight, Richard," I shouted. He laughed, a sound that wasn't human, echoing with the whispers of everyone he had betrayed. "It ends only when the lesson is complete," he said. I grabbed a piece of driftwood from the pier and swung, but my arms passed through him as if he were made of smoke. The water roared beneath me, and I felt myself slipping, the fog pulling me closer to the edge. My heart raced, panic clawed at me. Then I remembered the journal I had found at the lighthouse. It had told me everything, the ledger, the debts, the manipulation. I remembered the final line. "Betrayal must be witnessed, remembered, feared." I realized the power wasn't Richard himself. The power was the town, the docks, the darkness he had awakened in every corner of Ravenhill. I lunged at him, clutching the journal. I shouted every truth I knew, every betrayal, every lie, every injustice. My voice carried across the pier, through the fog, into the shadows, and then silence. When the fog lifted, the pier was empty. The lighthouse no longer glowed. The docks were still, quiet, almost peaceful. Richard was gone. But his presence had left a mark, not just on me, but on the town itself. Ravenhill would never be the same. Shadows still lingered in corners. Fog still rolled in from the sea. But I had survived. I had faced the betrayal, the deceit, and the weight of broken trust. And for the first time in weeks, I felt free. Yet, even now I carry the lesson with me. Trust is fragile. Betrayal can awaken forces you do not understand. And once deception takes root, it never truly dies. It waits, always. Sometimes, when I hear the waves crashing far away, I swear I hear his voice. You cannot escape. You will remember. You will fear. And I do. I will never forget Ravenhill. I will never forget Richard. And I will never forget the shadows that linger behind every lie. Discover the dark side of human trust in The Betrayal at Ravenhill, a story where secrets, lies, and betrayal blur the line between reality and nightmare. Will Daniel survive the shadows of his past? Subscribe to Polygon of Lies for more true-style horror stories, mysteries, and chilling tales you won't forget.